Good morning. My name is Wade Goodsell. I have the privilege of being the Executive Director of the WMC Foundation. Welcome to our annual Focus on Manufacturing breakfast. This morning, we're going to be diving into what I call the American manufacturing opportunity. But before we do, it's my privilege to introduce Jay McKenna, CEO of North Shore Bank. Jay, thank you to you and the team for again stepping up to serve as the generous presenting sponsor of our time together this morning. Over to you, Jay.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us. As the presenting sponsor of this Focus on Manufacturing breakfast, we're proud to be here with you today supporting Wisconsin manufacturers. Reflecting on the past year, we've certainly been reminded of the importance of being agile, innovative, steadfast, and accountable for the benefit of one another. Together, we've faced the unexpected and unusual challenges that come with a pandemic. North Shore Bank has remained open and operational in a safe manner to serve our customers. It is our mission as a community bank and an essential business to be available for our customers and communities. Our employees demonstrate this commitment every day. We've worked with individual customers adversely impacted by COVID, facilitated tens of millions of dollars of emergency PPP loans and grant requests, and help thousands of customers refinance their loans to take advantage of lower interest rates. North Shore Bank has been around for almost 100 years as an independent, locally based community bank with over 40 branches in eastern Wisconsin. We understand what it means to meet the ever-changing banking needs of customers, and that has allowed us to grow and endure for decades. We continue to evolve by building strong partnerships and offering the latest technology for the people who depend on us. It's our incredibly talented, experienced, and resourceful North Shore Bank staff that provides customized care for our customers. I encourage you to reach out to our knowledgeable and dedicated commercial banking team for assistance. With experience in serving the manufacturing community, they are ready to help you confront your unique challenges with solutions and provide expertise that will get you where you want to be. Thank you and have a great day.
Thanks, Jay, and thank you to the team at North Shore. I also want to thank Alex and the team at Riley Construction, as hopefully you saw when you registered for our session today. For the first time ever, we had a registration sponsor. Riley was kind enough to sponsor registrations so that all of you could attend complimentary today. Thank you to Alex and the team. I also want to thank Nexus Pharmaceutical for your support and sponsorship of the panel session that we'll be together later today. Speaking of thank you to the manufacturers, the innovators, the job creators, the PPE producers, those of you that stepped up to serve your communities, stepped up to fight against the pandemic, stepped up to serve your employees in 2020. In what was a turbulent year, we believe that manufacturers stood tall. At the WMC Foundation, it's our belief business is a force for good, and in no year more so recently than in 2020 was that evidenced by the work of many of you, Wisconsin manufacturers, companies who nominated for the Wisconsin Manufacturer of the Year Awards. Please join me in watching this few-minute video to see just a little bit of the work of Wisconsin manufacturers in 2020. I realize in a couple-minute video that's only a small glimpse into the leadership of manufacturers this year. We could monopolize the majority of our time this morning talking about how manufacturers have led in fighting against the pandemic, serving your teams, serving communities in which you operate. Thank you for your leadership this year. This morning, it's my privilege to introduce our WMC President and CEO, Kurt Bauer. If you don't know Kurt, he's been the CEO of WMC for the past 10 years after previously serving as the CEO for the Wisconsin and Arizona Bankers Association. Kurt's a national thought leader in both public policy as well as manufacturing. This morning, he's going to talk about the American manufacturing opportunity. Kurt, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Wade. Good morning. It's my pleasure to be the keynote speaker for this year's Focus on Manufacturing event, held, of course, virtually. Hopefully, we'll see you next year at the Pfister Hotel. But I appreciate having an opportunity to talk about what's happening in manufacturing and some of the trends. Frankly, from our perspective, we want to talk about the new administration in Washington and some of the policies that we think would really advance manufacturing, especially as we look at the post-COVID-19 environment. Think of it from this perspective. We know that we entered COVID-19 relatively unprepared from the standpoint that we had to rely on many other nations, including China, for access to medical supplies, pharmaceuticals, PPE. We didn't have a lot of that production here, and I think that really showed a vulnerability to the American manufacturing supply chain. So you look at it from the perspective that what can we do to address that going forward? And I think that should be a primary priority for the new Biden administration. So the lessons learned from COVID-19, obviously from our perspective, we can't rely on countries, certainly not China. China, I think, was revealed to be perhaps an unreliable partner during COVID-19. They were less than transparent in sharing with the international community the origins of COVID-19. We weren't necessarily sure about the seriousness and the severity of the virus initially because they held their cards close to the vest. So I think that we need to keep that in mind as we look at what we should do post-COVID-19. So the U.S. was unprepared. We were dependent on other countries. There were other vulnerabilities in the U.S. manufacturing supply chain. We know this to be true. There are a variety of different examples. I'll give you two. One, of course, is access to rare earth minerals. Those, of course, are the minerals that we definitely need to manufacture high-tech electronics. We are almost completely dependent on China for access to those, despite the fact that we have major deposits in North America. For a variety of reasons, we don't have the will to extract them in North America, so we're dependent on China. Another example I'll give you is flat-screen TVs, which, of course, we use for everything. We use them for our mobile devices. We use them in fighter jets. We use them pretty much for everything, medical devices. One of the advantages, I think, of having Foxconn come to Wisconsin, originally, of course, they were going to build these flat-screen TVs. The market, of course, has changed, but the fact remains that is a vulnerability in the American manufacturing supply chain that obviously has an economic and a national security consequence to us. So what is the solution to these challenges that COVID-19 has revealed to us? And the answer is, it's not that hard. We're talking about policies that incentivize reshoring manufacturing to the United States. And in particular, energy, immigration, and taxation. There are others, but for the sake of time, I'll focus on those three areas. So let's just take a little bit of a history lesson on why we lost manufacturing jobs. And that, of course, has occurred over a 30-year period at least, as we looked at lower cost production and access to markets, primarily in Asia. It got more expensive on labor, on energy to produce here in the United States and then ship to markets, emerging markets in Asia. It just made a lot more sense to produce there. So that's basically the history of how we were losing these manufacturing jobs over a period of time and how eventually in 2010 China became the world's largest manufacturer. The United States still holds the title as largest per capita, but overall China manufactures more goods than the United States does. But the world is always changing. So you look at the dynamics on how we lost jobs to China to where we are today. So you look at energy in particular, and that is a huge factor, of course, for manufacturing. For the vast majority of manufacturers, the number one cost of doing business is the cost of energy. Here in Wisconsin, for example, I know several companies that have monthly electricity bills in the 7 to 8 figures, so you can get a sense on just how expensive a cost that is, and if you can control it, you can be competitive. Of course, we're very fortunate in the United States right now. We have vast shale deposits, and we've figured out through fracking ways to tap into that oil and gas, and as a result, we have become a net exporter of oil and gas and have become very competitive globally on manufacturing in many other areas. The unfortunate thing from our perspective is that the Biden administration is looking to squander that major opportunity and advantage by raising the costs of energy. You saw that he has already canceled the Keystone XL pipeline, which would run tar sands oil from Alberta into the United States. That will have an impact. And then he has placed a moratorium on new leases and permits to frack on federal lands, which will also have an impact. Now, he did say during the campaign as a candidate, he actually reversed course, because you remember he initially had said that he was going to shut down fracking. Then later on he said that he would not shut down fracking and he'd use oil and gas as a bridge fuel until renewable energy sources received enough technological advancement where they were more reliable, more affordable, had more energy or generation capacity than they do today. The unfortunate thing that we're seeing is that the actions that he has taken so far, and what we've heard from some of his administration officials, notably former Secretary of State John Kerry, is that it looks to me like they're going to burn that bridge before we have a chance to get across it. And that's a real threat to us because, again, we have access to reliable and affordable energy here domestically in the United States and, of course, more broadly in North America. It's a huge competitive advantage, something that our economic rivals and our geopolitical adversaries can't match. And it's something that we should definitely be very careful about squandering that opportunity to access those funds and make American manufacturing competitive. Another area is workforce. Now, many of you have heard me speak or have read columns that I've written talking about the fact that we have a labor shortage in the United States and in particular here in Wisconsin. So how could this possibly be an advantage? Well, the answer to that is we do indeed have a labor shortage in the United States, and it's particularly pronounced in manufacturing. Pre-COVID, 600,000 manufacturing jobs had gone unfilled, and Deloitte estimates that by 2028, 2.4 million factory jobs in supply chain could go unfilled. So that tells you that there is a big need for workforce development in the manufacturing sector. So again, why is this an advantage? Because we're the United States of America and people from all around the world want to come here, and we should have an immigration policy that allows them to do so. If they want to contribute to our economy, they want to contribute to our society and our culture, we should have a process in place that allows them to do so. Particularly, let's talk about H-1B visas. Now, those are the visas for high-skilled laborers, many of whom who received a degree here and want to stay here, or those who want to come here. We limit that to 65,000 per year. That was by an act of Congress in 1990, so that's many years ago. The economy has changed dramatically since then. The country has gotten larger since then, and that's an arbitrary number that doesn't meet the needs of manufacturers or the rest of the workforce. So that is something that we hope that the Biden administration addresses. And then finally, I'm going to talk about taxes. So we started the Trump administration with among the highest corporate tax rates in the industrialized world, 35%. The Trump administration dropped that down to 21%, which is still high by comparison to, say, Canada at 15% or Ireland, which I believe is at 12.5 or 13%, somewhere around there. But it's still below the global average, and it does make us competitive. The the Biden administration or the Biden campaign had talked about raising that back up to 28%, which I think then would make us uncompetitive and above the global average. What I think that we should consider doing, however, if we truly want to reshore manufacturing jobs, we should do at the federal level what we do at the state level. As you know, we have the state manufacturers tax and the manufacturers and agriculture production credit. That incentivizes production and jobs here in Wisconsin. We should do that at the national level. It just makes sense. If you want those jobs here, if you want that economic activity here, if you want the security from an economic standpoint and a national security standpoint of having incentivized manufacturing here, then you need to do something to incentivize that. So you've got energy, you've got workforce, and you've got taxes, all of which we can control. This is not something that is dependent on international markets, anything at all like that. We can control all of these things ourselves. And I was thinking about this because President Eisenhower famously warned as he left office about the military-industrial complex and the fact that he thought that you would have this churning effect from the Pentagon and defense contractors trying to gin up more and more spending for the Pentagon. I think we're in a different situation right now where it's almost you can't afford not to have that military-industrial complex. And I think, again, that should be an important lesson that we learned from COVID-19. The fact that we had these vulnerabilities in manufacturing and the supply chain, we should address them as soon as we possibly can. And all of those opportunities exist right now in the United States. So we'll leave it there and look forward to hearing the reaction panel. So Wade, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Kurt, and thank you again for joining us today. This morning, I'm joined by a hotshot executive panel of manufacturing executives from throughout the state. Joining us this morning are Chris Drees, president of Mercury Marine, Bob Wahlin, president and CEO of Stoughton Trailers, and Omair Ahmed, chief strategy officer with Nexus Pharmaceuticals based in Lincolnshire, Illinois, but he'll share a little bit more on their catalytic investment here in Wisconsin. So to get started this morning, gentlemen, and Chris, maybe starting with you, tell us a little bit about your business, if you would.
Thanks, Wade. And as most people know, Mercury is about a $3 billion company, global company, located and headquartered right here in Wisconsin, Fond du Lac. In fact, half of our employees globally, about 3,500, work in the state and live here, which is great. And one quick fact, if you look out in the marketplace, 1 out of every 2 boats powered in the U.S. has a Mercury engine on the back.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, our family's pontoon, Chris, we have a 40 horse on the back. Thankfully, it's a Mercury. Thankfully, we haven't had any problems, but we need to get a little more horsepower on the back of the pontoon. Bob, tell us a little bit about your business down in Stoughton, if you would.
Sure. Thank you, Wade. Stoughton Trailers is a second-generation family-owned business headquartered in Stoughton, Wisconsin. We began back in 1961. We are the 5th largest trailer manufacturer in North America, 9th largest in the world, and we employ a little over 1,200 employees right now, and they are employed all in southern Wisconsin at 3 main campuses, one in Stoughton, one in Evansville, and one in Broadhead, Wisconsin.
Thanks, Bob. And Bob and Chris also both serve on our WMC board of directors, so thank you both for your leadership to the organization, especially during these interesting times that we'll get into later today. But Omair, share with us a little bit more about Nexus, both as a company, but also maybe if you would a little bit on the investment here in Wisconsin.
Sure, thanks, Wade. Nexus Pharmaceuticals is a manufacturer of generic and specialty injectable pharmaceutical products. Currently, we're headquartered in Lincolnshire, Illinois, but really what brings us to Wisconsin is our new manufacturing facility. Right now, we're looking to bring it online, hopefully within the next few months. The current phase 1 represents about $100 million investment, and we're already working on our phase 2. to bring in almost an additional $100 million, as well as an additional 150 jobs to Pleasant Prairie, Wisconsin, right on the border between Illinois and Wisconsin. And we're really excited to be here, especially considering the current economic and healthcare climate, and bringing more focus to reshoring a lot of the generic and overall medical manufacturing back here to the US.
Well, welcome to Wisconsin, Omair, and certainly in industry, in pharmaceutical and drug development, an industry really in the spotlight in 2020. So maybe staying with you, how would you describe the general state of manufacturing, both in Wisconsin and also in the United States coming out of 2020?
I would say that pharmaceuticals kind of reflects the broader manufacturing industry here in the US. We are very good at high-tech manufacturing, whether it's engines or planes or semiconductor chips. However, where we're really starting to lack is on commodities. Generic pharmaceuticals is no different than any other commodity when you think of it in certain ways. And the pressure globally has really driven out a lot of manufacturing domestically. What we've seen is that slowly the government is starting to understand the national security implications of not having domestic manufacturing and being able to control all the way from raw material to finished dose manufacturing. Because to be honest, there's probably very few individuals in the US that don't take some kind of medication on a daily or monthly basis. So really understanding the national security and kind of what Kurt pointed to, the industrial complex that needs to probably come around these sorts of daily necessities, to be quite honest. And Wisconsin has really been on the forefront on a lot of biological research, especially around Madison, and a lot of specialty work is being done here in Wisconsin. We're hoping to kind of broaden that out into more commodity products and everyday pharmaceuticals that all Americans are taking.
No, and I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more commentary, Omair, on reshoring and the opportunity for American pharmaceutical development and the emergence of new supply chains here domestically that I think the pandemic has shined a lot of light on the need for that. I should also mention, thank you for Nexus's general support of the program today, but also the sponsorship of this panel. Bob, turning to you, obviously a large footprint here in Wisconsin, but also a large national footprint of customer base. How would you describe the state of manufacturing, both in Wisconsin and also nationally?
Wade, we see it as somewhat fractured and inconsistent. And what I mean by that is, there are many areas in manufacturing still suffering and quite frankly are going to continue to suffer for a number of years. I think the effect of COVID, it obviously is just in the beginning stages. It's going to have long lasting effects, a lot that people really don't understand yet. And so there are parts of manufacturing that are suffering. However, there are many other areas that are flourishing. For us, when you look at transportation companies, many companies that are hauling things like construction materials and heavy equipment, particularly I would say in the summer and fall of COVID, a lot of those industries, they were almost shut down, if not entirely shut down. So they're in the state of rebuilding. However, those companies that were hauling smaller consumer goods, and if you think Amazon and those types of companies, they can't keep up. And they are placing orders that quite frankly are off the charts. So there's a pretty significant imbalance and kind of the haves and the have-nots. So part of the industry is taking off like a rocket, where others are still struggling and will be, I think, for quite some time.
Interesting perspective on that dichotomy between the haves and the have-nots. And Chris, from your perspective and what you see through the global lens of Mercury and Brunswick, how would you describe the state of manufacturing, both here at home in Wisconsin and also throughout the U.S.?
Wade, I think if you look across the America, there certainly have been companies that benefited from the pandemic and some that haven't. We've been really blessed because there's no better way to social distance than to take your family out on a boat, do a little fishing, have a little water sports. It's just a great time on the water. So we benefited along with our entire supply base of the rising volume and demand from the industry. But I know if you're in the hospitality segment or manufacturing airplanes at the time, people might not be so lucky. So we feel really blessed to have that opportunity.
Well, a good day on the lake sure beats a good day in the office. So looking into 2021, as we sit today, February 11th, looking into 2021, what are a few things that you're going to keep your eye on in terms of projections or trends? You teased that out a little bit on the state of manufacturing, but Chris, what are a trend or two that you're going to be keeping your eye on for your business in 2021?
I think, like Mercury, there's probably a lot of you out there right now that are having supply chain constraints all across your supply chains. We see it where issues pop up in one area, followed by another somewhere else. And once that's coupled with, I know Bob's in the transportation industry, but the lack of containers and ability to move freight, and the lack of the airspace to air freight products at the same time, it makes the supply chain so difficult for manufacturers right now. So I think that's going to be the companies that can really get ahead of it are going to do extremely well.
So maybe staying on that theme of supply chain, in our pre-panel prep, I know this is something that we discussed. Bob, in regards to supply chain, I know this is something that we recently discussed. What are the things to watch, or maybe before we talk about optimism, what are the cause for concerns regarding supply chain here in the U.S.?
Well, for us, and I think for a lot of manufacturers, it's the lack of a diverse and secure supply chain. I think a lot of manufacturing companies had relied very heavily on a supply chain that stretched well beyond the shores of the United States. And I think there have been significant difficulties keeping that supply chain active. And I think, there's going to be a large focus to reshore that activity, have greater reliance, and quite frankly, not be so dependent on areas and partners outside of the United States. I think that's going to have implications far beyond our supply chains. I think that's going to be going to bring up issues of national security and being able to keep the needed goods and services flowing to the U.S. economy. And I think people are realizing how important that is, and really how vulnerable we were, not only in manufacturing, but just vulnerable from a national security standpoint. So it's very significant. And if I could add one thing from what Chris said, I would also keep a very close eye on workforce availability. And in my opinion, it's going to fall far short of the demands that are going to be out there. So for us, we're already seeing a pretty massive shortfall. And look, right now, we have the opportunity on orders. We could, if we could wave a magic wand and have 500 skilled and prepared workers show up at our door tomorrow, we could bring them on. So there is a significant shortfall. I think that's not only in Wisconsin, but it's throughout the United States. And as business returns and we come out of COVID, that is going to be, in my opinion, the biggest obstacle for manufacturing growth, probably for quite a few years to come.
Well, and that's not only startling in regards to workforce, Bob, and that's something that we'll get into a little bit later. For those of us that watch things like demographics, We've sat back and said, is COVID going to lead to a baby boom? Unfortunately, the preliminary information and data looks like it's going to lead to a further baby bust and a further decrease in births in the United States, which certainly is not going to help our workforce short term or long term. But staying on the topic of supply chain, Omair, share a little bit, if you would, about Nexus. Bob mentioned critical needed supplies, national security issues, resiliency during a pandemic, all things that thrust your industry into the spotlight in 2020. Talk a little bit about the opportunity for reshoring in pharmaceutical and drug development into the United States, if you would.
Yeah, sure. And kind of echoing what Chris and Bob said, per Chris's point, the overnight lack of freight and air shipment really put a huge impediment on delivering medication, especially so much of what we do is cold chain. It had to be air freight, but when domestic and international travel really stopped, a lot of those piggybacks and jump shipments, those all stopped, and you really couldn't get anything from overseas in a fast or economical time frame at that point. So I think what's happened over the last 20 years of manufacturing in general has become very good at being lean, right? Let's go find the cheapest source. Our freight partners and our cargo partners have become really good about sourcing products from Slovenia and China and Africa, wherever we needed to. You could get it into the US basically in 4 weeks, no matter what. But it came at a cost, right? And the cost was we really let things go here in the US and we did not reinforce what used to be the case, right? We can make it here. It might not be the cheapest to make it in the US, but the supply chain is much more robust and kind of what's going on. And I think that's been the biggest change for us, because as pharmaceuticals is such a global business, so many of our raw materials come from India and China because, quite frankly, nobody had either the appetite to make it in the US or it just wasn't economically feasible. So when we started relying almost 80-90% of our raw materials coming from China and India, you can see how we could lead to kind of the situation we're in 2020. And really what we're looking for in the future is to see how do people react, how long term is everybody's memory. Do we kind of forget about it and say, okay, everything's back to normal, or do we really try to put that investment back? And we feel the same thing. We have such a labor shortfall here in the US, especially in highly skilled, and even just our general labor force. Trying to find consistent, reliable labor is becoming an increasing issue. And I think, per Kurt's point earlier, immigration is definitely going to be an issue. And how do we get more skilled work here where, to be quite frank, we can hire people right away. We just can't find them. So pharmaceuticals is right there with it. And it comes down to, if you're making a drug that sells for thousands of dollars, I'm sure it's being made in the US. But if you're making things that have to be cost competitive, more likely than not, it's coming ex-US. So really trying to bring that balance into focus and make sure people understand the value, not just the government, but even consumers, of what is the value of having something made right here in the US.
That's great insight. And what I'm hearing from this discussion so far, gentlemen, what I described Kurt's remarks as earlier as the American manufacturing opportunity. We have a real opportunity for reshoring in this country, but as Kurt outlined, public policy matters, whether that's in immigration, whether that's in energy, whether that's in tax and cost of doing business. Policy matters, and the right policies are going to help to accelerate that American manufacturing opportunity that's in front of us. Staying on the topic of workforce, immigration is something that, as you heard Kurt allude to, WMC is very supportive of. We need more people. We need them here legally. We need more talented people here, not only in this state, but in this country. All three of you alluded to the workforce constraints in your different companies. Share a little bit, if you would, about some of the creative approaches or partnerships that you've taken to try to meet your current workforce needs. And Chris, maybe if you would answer that first.
Wade, I'm going to take a little bit different tact, and there's a portion of the workforce that I think is extremely tight labor supply, and that's skilled trades. When you look at the ability on electricians and or machinists, those skilled trades are so essential in manufacturing to keep the operations running, to program equipment. all of that, and those jobs are really high-paying jobs, good jobs, that we need more people to get into that. You know, a couple of things that we particularly do at Mercury is we sponsor a local STEM school to try and bring younger people, younger generation into STEM and really focus on some skilled trades. And we've done a great work partnering with local technical colleges, Moraine Park Technical College in particular, and helping them set up machinist programs and other things to try and build that workforce right here in Wisconsin. Instead of being a net exporter of talent, we'd rather bring people in and also train those employees. And I think that's so critical for manufacturers around the state.
Well, really well stated. And you know, partnerships and relationships are paramount in any work, but especially in the work of education and workforce development. And you guys have really led in Fond du Lac in the partnership with the STEM school. Bob, would you be willing to share a little bit about some of the maybe outside the box approaches that you guys have utilized at Stoughton Trailers?
You bet. You know, like Chris said, it's important to get into those younger ages and bring them into the factories, whether it's for tours or apprenticeships or anything else. But to change that mindset throughout the U.S. that tends to, you know, there's still some circles that may view manufacturing as dark and dirty and backbreaking, but really bring awareness to the younger generation that no, there's technology, there's automation, there's fun, interesting things in manufacturing as well. So beyond the younger generation, we've had good success stretching out and bringing people in from areas outside Wisconsin. We have a lot of great employees that are joining us from Wisconsin, but we've had to reach out to other parts of the United States and its territories. So we've had a successful onboarding of people from Puerto Rico, where we've had different partnerships where there's an interview process, a skill testing process, and then also placement and arrangement of housing and how to get them acclimated to life in Wisconsin. And for some people from Puerto Rico, you know, being exposed to things like ice fishing in some of these cold winters, it's a little bit of a cultural shock, but we've had great success with that. We've also had good success with working with correctional facilities, you know, particularly the work release programs of nonviolent offenders, you know, giving people that may have made a mistake a second chance and an opportunity to get back and really contribute to what's going on in Wisconsin and beyond. So those are some of the things that we've had some success with, and I would consider creative ways to continue to bring in people into our workforce from various walks of life and different areas of the country.
Thank you for sharing that, Bob. And really, that's an overarching best practice that we hear from our members. Labor is tight nationally. Demographic trends in the U.S., especially in our state throughout the Midwest, are not promising. And the ones that are treading water in this labor environment, we call it, they play on all corners of the field. They're creative, they have partnerships, they're innovative, you know, and 1 + 1 + 1, because you're not going to find a pool of 500 workers in any one place. You need to go 1 + 1. Speaking of finding pools of workers, Omair, you alluded to Nexus's catalytic investment here in the state of Wisconsin. What partnerships or what approach have you guys pursued so far in terms of trying to recruit a workforce in Pleasant Prairie to help meet the growth of Nexus and the growth of the business?
Mm-hmm. And much like what Bob said, you know, we're really trying to leave no stone unturned, whether it's partnering with our local UW campus at Parkside, trying to create more STEM focused, more trade focused degrees and pursuits, basically career pursuits for young individuals, partnering with Gateway Technical College as well. Because for our facility, when you look on the outside, you don't understand that we're looking all the way from operating a boiler to microbiologists to engineers and electricians and chemists. We need, the whole gamut of trades and both blue collar and white collar work there. So it's really just trying to make sure we are conveying that message to the general public that manufacturing is not, some dark and dirty sort of coal mine that maybe it was during the Industrial Revolution. We're really taking the next step. And I think what's interesting for us is a few years back, we went to Germany to look at one of our main pieces of equipment. They have the same issue, very low birth rate, very hard to find skilled labor. They started getting apprentices into their workshop at 16 years old, and they stay with them until they graduate college, and then they come back to work there. So really trying to target, and we're trying to take that same approach, younger high school, college age kids, and bring them into the factory, see firsthand what we're doing and how they can be a part of it and know that this is a career, right? It's not just a stopgap, that you can really build a whole career out of it. And I think that has been really key about, not just today's issue, but what are we going to do 5 years from now when a lot of our folks, retire? Who are they passing their knowledge to?
And as many of you know, in the WMC Foundation, part of our role in this is we run a business entrepreneurship and free enterprise education program for high school students throughout the state, work with 3,000 to 4,000 kids throughout the year. And as Omair mentioned, it's career awareness, career development, whether it's a 2-year, a 4-year, the military, the workforce. As you leave high school, know that there's different options in front of you. There's no one path, and that's just a small thing we're doing in our foundation and one of many things going on throughout the state of Wisconsin. Zooming out a little bit, Kurt mentioned the idea and the concept of a federal manufacturing and agricultural tax credit. The manufacturing and ag credit is something that WMC has been very supportive of over the last decade. It's something that I would say inarguably has fueled growth and investment into the state of Wisconsin. Conceptually, if President Biden and if leaders in Congress considered a federal manufacturing and agricultural tax credit, what type of incentive would that be for manufacturers to continue to grow and increase investment and job creation here in the United States? Chris, maybe start with you on your vantage point and what that might look like, if you would.
Right. Thanks, Wade. We operate and have facilities globally, whether it be in China and in Mexico, throughout Europe. So we have a very broad manufacturing base, and similar to the R&D tax credit that's offered through the state, it does provide great incentives to invest in the United States and keep growing. Whether it be in overseas in China, they have similar programs with R&D tax credits in particular. So when you're adding engineers and you're adding talent, that really becomes a focal point of where to do it effectively. So I believe the promotion and the tax credit for manufacturing, certainly I think that everybody on this call would be beneficial. I know in the past they've used a different point of using tariffs as well, and that's driven a lot of manufacturing back to the states as well, with the 301 tariffs being at 25% with a lot of our product. I think when you talk about risk of supply chain, that becomes a critical factor to de-risk it, and incentives certainly will help things. Also, tariffs provided a huge role in I think manufacturers across this nation in reevaluating where they manufacture their products. So, Wade, I don't think anyone would disagree. That would be certainly beneficial for the manufacturing community within the state.
Good point and good perspective. It's our worldview. Honey works better than vinegar. Omair, Bob, what would you add to that?
Similar to what Chris said, I mean, the government has a lot of tools at their disposal, whether it be a tax credit or a tariff. And to be honest here, in all my years of travel, a lot of foreign governments take a very keen interest in manufacturing. They view it as a pillar of their national security and their ability to not only fend for themselves, defensively, but also economically. And I think that's the focus we need here in the US. I think we've become such a service-oriented economy that we've really lost sight of what built the US to where we are, where we were a net exporter. versus a net importer. And I can speak for pharmaceuticals. We are vastly a net importer of doses of medication. And with everything that's going on geopolitically, as well as healthcare related, we really need to kind of revise that. And the government, even if it's providing an economic incentive to a tax credit, it also sends a message, right? This is where our head's at. This is where, the investment is going, and it really does build upon itself. The public investment and the public trust in manufacturing will lead to much more private investment, and it can just build on top of that. So we really think that it's key that we send the right message nationally.
Certainly, policies matter. And Bob, what would you add to that?
Yeah, so Omar and Chris said it very well, but a couple of things to add. I don't see it as just a benefit. I see it as a necessity. And we've discussed the need for reshoring, onshoring, but the only way that's going to happen and be successful long term is if U.S. manufacturers are competitive on a global scale. And and we need to provide those incentives that allows them to do that. If that is not there, my fear would be, although we've learned lessons and we've taken it on the chin, so to speak, as a country, and are paying the penalty for not having a manufacturing base that is self-sufficient. If we don't have the incentives and if U.S. manufacturers cannot be competitive on a global scale, we're going to go right back to where we were before, and it's going to be even worse. So I think that is critically important, and again, in the form of incentives, not handouts. So I think it's absolutely essential for the long-term strength of the U.S. manufacturing base to do something similar to what Wisconsin did on a federal level.
Bob, so that word competitiveness, two questions for each of you as we close today. I'll start with the first. So along the lines of competitiveness, President Biden and his administration, the new Congress that came in 3 or 4 weeks on the new job, Kurt teased out kind of the American manufacturing opportunity. We have the opportunity to control our own destiny as it relates to workforce and immigration, as it relates to energy and policy and cost of energy, and then as it relates to taxation and the concept that we just discussed. What advice would each of you offer for President Biden and his administration to help with competitiveness for American manufacturing, which would certainly be a benefit as well to manufacturing here in Wisconsin? Bob, let's maybe stay with you. What advice would you have for the Biden administration?
So my advice to that administration would be to focus and concentrate on incentives, not necessarily mandates. Mandates always come with unintended consequences, and you don't want to mandate activity that is going to drive waste and inefficiency into the process. So provide incentives. Provide a overall tax strategy to drive business and consumers over time to make the best decisions. Not as mandates, but as incentives. With the right incentives in place, American people and businesses are smart. They're gonna make good decisions and decisions that make sense.
Really well stated. Omair, what would your word of advice be to the Biden administration?
I think it's really a focus on, the incentives being properly placed and understanding the changing marketplace. What worked 20 years ago may not be working anymore. And definitely the market hand is what's driving a lot of the things that happen in the sector. And we really need to make sure we're making changes. And specifically for pharmaceuticals, we need to view it as we do a lot of other industries, whether it's aluminum or steel, and understand that it's a global marketplace and that the US has really fallen behind on understanding the economics that go on with it. We import so much medication from India and China, and that we export back near nothing. And I think understanding that huge trade imbalance and trying to bring things back, we have to be equitable. It's one thing to be equal and say it's an equal playing field, but we spent so many years dismantling passively our US manufacturing base that we need to do a little bit extra to bring it back and provide those incentives to make it worth people's while. And the economy will start to lead itself. We're a very hardworking and creative country. If the incentives are there, people will fill in those gaps.
American ingenuity and entrepreneurial nature. Chris, word of advice to President Biden and his administration.
It'd be good to remind them that I believe many of us compete on the in the global marketplace. With Mercury in particular, we're the last marine propulsion system manufacturer left in the States. Our competition, whether it be Yamaha, Suzuki, Volvo, are all built overseas, whether it be in Japan or elsewhere. So we're competing in that. So tax policy, things like energy policies and regulation play a significant impact on how competitive that we can be in the global marketplace. So I believe understanding that and making sure we can position ourselves and work together to advance various goals that the administration has will be critical in keeping America and keeping our manufacturing strong.
And Chris, along those lines of positioning and advancement, as many of you know, a large part of our WMC Foundation is our Future Wisconsin project. And if you're not familiar, the Future Wisconsin project's designed to think about the long-term economic health of the state of Wisconsin. We view our roles in the WMC Foundation to be the thought leaders for the Wisconsin economy. In December, we have an annual summit. This year, the foundation and the Future Wisconsin project are focused on compiling the Wisconsin 2035 report. The thought process is this: we're spending the first 6 months of the year talking to thought leaders amongst industry, government, academia, labor. No one group has a monopoly on good ideas. We're talking to 100 different thought leaders from throughout the state. And we want to put forward in the second half of this year, to be announced at our Future Wisconsin Summit in December, the business community's vision for the state, a report that we're going to call Wisconsin 2035. How can we be more competitive as a state than we are in the middle of the next decade than we are today? So with that in mind, Chris, maybe starting with you, if in Wisconsin we only do one thing, just one, between now and the middle of the next decade to enhance our economic competitiveness, what would it be?
Wade, I wish I could boil my business down to one thing that we have to do well. But it all starts with the people. And as we indicated, having the right workforce, the right training, the right skill set, I believe is going to be one of the biggest assets the state could have long term. Not to mention a better tax policy, energy policy, et cetera, but workforce development and making sure that we have the people and with the right skill set is going to be so crucial in helping Wisconsin move forward.
And Bob, how about for you and Stoughton Trailers?
Yeah, I would echo what Chris outlined. It's improved access to and development of a skilled workforce. In Kurt's talk, he mentioned a pre-COVID shortage of over 600,000 skilled manufacturing workers nationally. I believe he also mentioned a projected shortage of 2.4 million by 2028. I mean, that is staggering to me. And, when we talk about our challenges of manufacturing self-sufficiency for the U.S., onshoring and all that, and all the security, the national security benefits that come along with that. Without good people, as Chris outlined, it's just not going to happen. So it's absolutely critical that we build that workforce, we build that skill set, and after all, it is the heart of manufacturing, and that's the people.
And Omair, one thing, what would it be for the state of Wisconsin, the future of our economic competitiveness?
I think it's going to be 3 for 3 here. I think it's definitely people. We really, and we've already started that, the investment in our young people and to make them the next generation of manufacturers, skilled tradesmen, and just really feeding into what the new economy will be and understanding, not everybody needs a 4-year degree. So we need electricians. We need, all of these are very good, high-paying jobs, and we need an overall focus and investment from the state into those programs to develop the workforce of the future. And to be quite frank, being very welcoming, to people moving from other parts of the country, other parts of the world, and just saying, Wisconsin's open for business, and we need people who are going to come and help us make the products of tomorrow.
And Omair, that's a great last word. And thank you again for your support of this session today and for this conversation. I think in summary, what I'm hearing is workforce matters, nothing without people. I think that we are on the doorsteps of a great American manufacturing opportunity, both as a country, but also here in Wisconsin. But certainly, as Kurt alluded to, public policy is important. We need to get the right policies if we want to have the right economic prosperity in our state and in our country. So Bob, Chris, Omair, thank you so much for your insight and for your time this morning. Omair, again, thank you for Nexus's support today. Thank you to Jay and the team at North Shore Bank for your loyal support and being the presenting sponsor again of our Focus on Manufacturing Breakfast. Alex and the team at Riley Construction, thank you for providing complimentary registration to our 500 attendees today. We greatly appreciate your support. We appreciate your engagement. If you're interested in partnering with us and learning more about our Wisconsin 2035 initiative, I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Have a great rest of the day and a great rest of the week. Thank you.